Abandoned in the heart of a deadly snowstorm, a mother golden retriever and her 10 helpless puppies huddled together, fighting for survival. But why were they left to freeze in such a cruel and desolate place? Was it simply neglect, or something far more sinister? What secrets are buried beneath the snow? Stay with us as we uncover a tale of courage, sacrifice, and the mysterious truth behind their abandonment. You won't believe what happens next. The wind howled through the towering pines, bending their branches under the weight of fresh snow. It was mid-January, and the small mountain town of Aspen Ridge was locked in the grip of a relentless winter storm. Visibility was scarce, the world reduced to a swirling blur of white and grey. Sarah Harper, a 40-year-old wildlife photographer, tightened her scarf around her face, her breath visible in the icy air. Despite the bitter cold, she was out, camera slung over her shoulder, hoping to capture the raw beauty of nature's fury. She wasn't new to harsh conditions. For years, Sarah had roamed mountains, forests, and deserts in search of the perfect shot. But something about this storm unsettled her. The air felt heavier, the silence between gusts almost deafening. She pressed on, boots crunching against the snow, when a faint sound stopped her in her tracks. A muffled whimper. At first, she thought it might be the wind playing tricks on her, but then it came again. A weak, high-pitched cry, barely audible over the storm. Her heart quickened. Turning her head toward the sound, she scanned the landscape, her eyes narrowing against the snowflakes pelting her face. A few yards ahead, nestled against the base of a tree, was a small mound. It didn't look like much at first, just a pile of snow. But as Sarah approached, her breath caught. Underneath, a thin blanket of frost, lay a golden retriever, its fur matted and pale against the whiteness of the storm. The dog was curled tightly, her body shielding something. "Oh my God!" Sarah dropped to her knees beside the animal, brushing snow away with trembling hands. The dog's eyes opened weakly, reflecting a mixture of pain and fear. Beneath her were 10 tiny puppies, their fragile bodies shivering despite being tucked under their mother's protective frame. The sight was both heartbreaking and surreal. The golden retriever was emaciated, her ribs visible through her thin coat. Yet she had positioned herself to keep the puppies as warm as possible, even at the cost of her own strength. Sarah's chest tightened. How could such a gentle creature end up here, abandoned in a storm? "Hey, girl," she whispered softly, her voice breaking. "It's okay. I'm here now." The dog flinched slightly but didn't move, her body too weak to resist. Sarah noticed a bright red collar around her neck, nearly buried under snow. She gently tilted it to reveal the name engraved on the metal tag. Daisy. "Daisy," Sarah murmured, her voice heavy with emotion. "Who did this to you?" The storm intensified, snow biting at Sarah's face and hands. She realized she didn't have much time. The puppies were dangerously cold, their tiny whimpers growing fainter. Pulling off her jacket, she carefully placed the pups inside, wrapping them against her chest. Daisy's gaze followed every movement, her eyes filled with a desperate plea. "You're coming with me," Sarah said firmly. She slid her arms under Daisy's fragile body and lifted her gently. The dog let out a faint whine, but didn't resist. The weight of the mother and her puppies was a burden, but Sarah pushed through, fueled by adrenaline and an overwhelming sense of responsibility. The hike back to her cabin felt endless. The wind clawed at her, and the snowdrifts grew deeper with every step. But Sarah didn't stop. She whispered words of encouragement to Daisy, even though she wasn't sure the dog could hear her over the storm. By the time she reached the cabin, her legs were trembling, and her fingers were numb. She kicked open the door and hurried inside, the warmth of the fireplace hitting her like a wave. Gently, she placed Daisy on a blanket by the hearth and unwrapped the puppies from her jacket. They squirmed weakly, their tiny bodies still cold but alive. Sarah moved quickly, grabbing towels and gently rubbing each puppy to stimulate their circulation. Daisy watched her intently, her body too weak to move, but her eyes filled with gratitude. "It's okay, Daisy," Sarah murmured. "You're safe now. I'll take care of you." As she worked, Sarah's mind raced. The storm outside was brutal, and there was no way Daisy and her puppies had made it here on their own. Someone had abandoned them. But why? The bright red collar suggested that Daisy had been loved, cared for. What could possibly lead someone to leave her and her litter to die in the snow? Once the puppies were dry and warm, Sarah set them in a makeshift bed by the fire, a box lined with soft blankets. She placed Daisy beside them, stroking the dog's head gently. Daisy let out a soft sigh, her eyes fluttering closed, for the first time since Sarah had found her. The sight brought a lump to Sarah's throat. She couldn't shake the image of Daisy lying in the snow, sacrificing her own warmth for her pups. It was a level of love and devotion Sarah had rarely seen, even in humans. After making sure the little family was comfortable, Sarah brewed a cup of tea and sat on the floor beside them. Her mind wandered to the collar. Who was Daisy's owner? What had happened to them? And why had they chosen such a cruel fate for this loyal dog and her innocent puppies? The questions swirled in her mind as the fire crackled softly, casting warm light across the cabin. Daisy's breathing was slow but steady, her body finally relaxing in the safety of the warm room. The puppies, now dry and snug, nestled against their mother, their tiny snores a soothing contrast to the howling wind outside. Sarah's gaze lingered on the little family, and a wave of determination washed over her. She didn't know who had left Daisy to die or why, but she knew one thing for certain: she wouldn't let them suffer again. Daisy and her puppies had found refuge in her home, and she would do everything in her power to keep them safe. As the storm raged on, Sarah silently vowed to uncover the truth. Whatever mystery surrounded Daisy's abandonment, she would get to the bottom of it, and in the process, she would ensure that Daisy and her puppies would never face such cruelty again. The storm outside showed no signs of easing. Snow pounded against the windows of Sarah's cabin, the wind wailing like a restless spirit. Inside, the air was warm and quiet, save for the soft crackling of the fire and the faint whimpers of the puppies nestled in their makeshift bed. Daisy lay nearby, her body still weak but no longer trembling from the cold. Sarah hovered over the family, carefully placing a bowl of warm broth near Daisy. "Here you go, girl," Sarah said softly, sliding the bowl closer. Daisy lifted her head slightly, sniffing the bowl, but she hesitated. Her eyes darted toward her puppies, her gaze sharp and protective. Only when she was certain Sarah wasn't a threat did she begin to lap at the broth. Sarah observed the dog closely. Daisy's behavior was more than just maternal. It was almost hypervigilant. If Sarah moved too close to the puppies, Daisy's ears would perk up and her body would tense, as if preparing to defend them. It wasn't aggression, Sarah realized, but fear. Something had happened to this dog to make her so wary of humans. "Who hurt you?" Sarah whispered, sitting cross-legged on the floor a safe distance away. Daisy didn't respond, of course, but her tired eyes seemed to hold a world of pain and secrets. The hours slipped by, and Sarah's priority was ensuring the little family's survival. She carefully bottle-fed the smallest puppies, whose tiny bodies still struggled to retain warmth. Daisy watched her every move, her eyes never leaving Sarah's hands. Though Sarah had worked with animals for years, she'd never encountered this level of guardedness in a dog. By the time night fell, the storm had become a full-blown blizzard, trapping Sarah in the cabin with her unusual guests. She didn't mind. The situation gave her time to focus on Daisy and her puppies. As she tidied up around the fireplace, Sarah noticed Daisy shifting uncomfortably. The dog was nudging at her collar with her paw, almost as if something was bothering her. Curious, Sarah leaned in. "Let me take a look, girl," "It's okay," she said gently. Daisy flinched but didn't resist as Sarah reached for the collar. Beneath the red fabric, Sarah felt something solid, a small, concealed pocket stitched into the lining. Her brow furrowed. What was this? Carefully, Sarah opened the tiny pocket and pulled out a small, rusted key. It was simple in design, with no markings except for a faint number engraved on the side, 201. She turned it over in her hands, puzzled. What could a dog possibly be doing with a key hidden in her collar? She glanced at Daisy, who was now watching her intently. It was as if the dog understood that Sarah had discovered something important. Sarah felt a chill, not from the cold, but from the strange weight of the key in her palm. The next morning, the storm began to ease, leaving a thick blanket of snow covering the ground. Sarah busied herself tending to Daisy and the puppies, but her thoughts kept circling back to the key. Who had hidden it in Daisy's collar, and why? The questions gnawed at her. By midday, Sarah couldn't resist any longer. She decided to take a closer look at the collar itself. Holding it under the light of the window, she noticed faint scratches on the inside of the metal tag where Daisy's name was engraved. It looked as if someone had tried to scratch something else onto the tag, but stopped midway. It was barely legible, but Sarah thought she could make out the beginning of a word. V. Her mind raced. Was it a name, a location? She didn't know, but it added another layer to the mystery. Sarah couldn't help but wonder if Daisy's behavior, her fear, her protectiveness, was tied to whatever secret this key and collar held. That afternoon, Sarah called her friend Tom, a retired veterinarian who lived in the next town over. Tom had always been her go-to for animal emergencies, and she trusted his judgment. "Tom, I've got something strange here," Sarah said as she cradled the phone against her ear. "I found a golden retriever in the storm last night. She's got 10 puppies. Adorable, but barely holding on. That's not the weird part, though." "Sounds like you've had an eventful night," Tom replied with a chuckle. "What's the weird part?" "She had a key hidden in her collar," Sarah said, "and it doesn't look like she was abandoned randomly. There's something off about this whole situation." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then Tom said, "Bring her and the puppies in when the road's clear. I'll check them out, and we'll see if we can figure out where she came from." "I will," Sarah promised. "But Tom, have you ever heard of something like this? A dog being used to hide something?" "It's not unheard of," Tom said carefully. "But it's rare. If someone went to the trouble of hiding a key on a dog, they were either very desperate or very clever." As the sun set that evening, Sarah sat by the fire, the key resting on the coffee table in front of her. Daisy lay on the floor nearby, her puppies snuggled against her belly. For the first time, Daisy seemed to relax, her eyes heavy with exhaustion. Sarah reached out slowly, letting her hand rest gently on the dog's head. Daisy didn't flinch this time. Instead, she let out a soft sigh, as if finally allowing herself to trust. Sarah's gaze shifted to the key. Whatever it unlocked, she had a feeling it was tied to why Daisy and her puppies had been abandoned. It was a puzzle she couldn't ignore, and the more she thought about it, the more determined she became to uncover the truth. As the fire crackled and the wind howled faintly outside, Sarah made a silent vow. She would protect Daisy and her puppies, no matter what. But she would also find out who had left them to die in the snow, and why they thought this brave, loyal mother was the perfect hiding place for their secret. The morning sun broke through the frost-covered windows of Sarah's cabin, casting a warm glow on the small family she had rescued. Daisy was resting, her breathing steady, while the puppies wriggled in their sleep. Sarah, however, was far from at ease. The key she had found in Daisy's collar and the faint scratches on her name tag were a puzzle that gnawed at her. She needed answers. Later that day, the roads finally cleared enough for Sarah to make the trip to Tom's clinic. She loaded Daisy and her puppies into her truck, carefully wrapping the little ones in blankets to shield them from the biting cold. The drive was tense. Every mile felt like a step deeper into a mystery she couldn't yet understand. Tom, a gentleman in his 60s with a gruff exterior and a heart of gold, greeted her at the clinic. "Let's take a look at them," he said, his eyes softening as he examined the exhausted mother and her tiny brood. Daisy was calm but alert, watching every movement Tom made. He checked her vitals, examined the puppies, and then sat back with a thoughtful expression. "They're lucky you found them when you did," Tom said. "Another night out there and they wouldn't have made it. But Sarah—" He hesitated, glancing at Daisy. "There's something about this dog. She's not just any stray." Sarah leaned forward. "What do you mean?" Tom pointed to Daisy's collar. "That's not a cheap collar, and the fact that there was a key hidden in it. Someone cared about this dog, enough to trust her with something important. Have you figured out what the key is for?" "Not yet," Sarah admitted. "But there's more. I noticed scratches on the back of her tag, like someone tried to write something. It's incomplete, but it starts with AV. Could it be a name?" Tom's brow furrowed. "Let me do some digging. If someone went to the trouble of hiding something on this dog, there's a reason." A few hours later, Sarah sat in Tom's office, sipping a cup of lukewarm coffee. Tom had been combing through local records and databases, trying to piece together Daisy's story. Finally, he leaned back in his chair, a troubled expression on his face. "I found something," he said, sliding a printed report across the desk. Sarah picked it up, her heart sinking as she read. The name Victor Evans stood out immediately. According to the report, Victor was Daisy's registered owner, and he had been reported missing 2 months ago. The circumstances of his disappearance were suspicious. Neighbors had heard a commotion at his house late one night, but by the time police arrived, Victor was gone, and so was Daisy. "What happened to him?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "No one knows for sure," Tom said, "but the police suspected foul play. There were signs of a struggle in his house, overturned furniture, broken glass. Victor wasn't exactly a model citizen either. He had a clean record on paper, but there were rumors he was involved in some shady dealings." Sarah frowned. "Shady dealings? Like what?" "Illegal activities. Smuggling, maybe. It's all speculation, but it's clear he had enemies. A man like that doesn't just vanish without reason." Tom gestured to Daisy. "And now his dog shows up with a litter of puppies and a mysterious key. It's no coincidence." The revelation left Sarah reeling. She looked at Daisy, who was curled up in the corner of the office, her puppies nestled close. The dog seemed so ordinary, so unassuming, yet she was at the center of something far bigger than Sarah could have imagined. "I don't understand," Sarah said, shaking her head. "If Victor cared about Daisy, why would he leave her out in a storm, and why would someone abandon her puppies?" Tom leaned forward, his voice low. "Maybe he didn't abandon her. Maybe he trusted her to protect something, those puppies. They might be more than just her litter." Sarah's eyes widened. "You think they're connected to whatever Victor was involved in?" "It's possible," Tom said. "If Victor was in trouble, he might have used Daisy to hide something, and if someone else knew about it, they'd be looking for her," Sarah finished, her voice trembling. As Sarah drove back to her cabin, the weight of what she had learned pressed heavily on her. Victor's disappearance, Daisy's protective behavior, the key, it all pointed to a larger story, one that was far from over. She glanced at Daisy in the rearview mirror. The dog was watching her, those intelligent eyes filled with a mixture of trust and caution. When they arrived home, Sarah immediately went to her desk and pulled out the key. Holding it in her hand, she studied the number engraved on it, 201. What could it open? A safe? A locker? Whatever it was, she was certain it held the answers to Victor's disappearance and Daisy's ordeal. That night, Sarah lay awake, her mind racing. Every detail felt significant, yet the pieces refused to fit together. Why had Victor hidden a key in Daisy's collar? What connection did the puppies have to his disappearance? And most importantly, who was still looking for Daisy? And what lengths would they go to if they found her? Just as Sarah was drifting off to sleep, a sound jolted her awake. It was faint, but unmistakable. The crunch of snow outside her cabin. She sat up, her heart pounding. Someone was out there. Grabbing a flashlight, Sarah crept to the window. The beam of light cut through the darkness, revealing nothing but an expanse of undisturbed snow. Still, the uneasy feeling lingered. Was it her imagination, or was someone watching her? She turned back to Daisy, who was now awake and alert, her ears perked. The dog's body language confirmed what Sarah already suspected. They weren't alone. The snowstorm had returned with a vengeance, blanketing the mountains in a suffocating silence. The only sounds outside Sarah's cabin were the relentless howl of the wind and the soft rustle of snow piling against the windows. Inside, however, the atmosphere was anything but calm. Daisy lay curled up by the fire with her puppies, her ears twitching occasionally at the distant sounds of the storm. Sarah, meanwhile, sat at her kitchen table, the mysterious key lying in front of her, its cold metal glinting under the dim light. She hadn't been able to stop thinking about the stranger who might have been outside her cabin the night before. Was it her imagination, or had someone really been watching her? And if so, were they after Daisy, and whatever secret Victor had hidden with her? Lost in thought, Sarah jumped at a sudden noise outside, a faint but distinct crunch of snow, the unmistakable sound of footsteps. Her heart began to race as she froze, straining to listen. The storm made it difficult to pinpoint the direction of the sound, but there was no mistaking it. Someone was out there. Grabbing her flashlight, Sarah moved cautiously toward the window. She flipped the beam on, her breath catching in her throat, as it illuminated a figure standing just beyond the porch. The man was haggard, his clothes disheveled and coated in snow. His face was obscured by a hood, but his posture radiated desperation. He didn't move, didn't try to hide. He just stood there, watching the cabin with an intensity that sent a chill down Sarah's spine. Her instincts screamed for her to lock the door, but she couldn't look away. Summoning her courage, she cracked the window slightly, just enough for her voice to carry through. "Who's there?" she demanded, her voice firm despite the tremor in her chest. The man hesitated for a moment before stepping closer, his boots sinking into the snow with each step. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough, edged with urgency. "I'm not here to hurt you. I just need the dog, Daisy. She doesn't belong to you." Sarah's stomach dropped. How did he know Daisy's name? Tightening her grip on the flashlight, she took a deep breath. Daisy was abandoned in the snowstorm. I found her. If she has an owner, where were you when she was freezing to death? The man's face contorted with frustration, and he pulled back his hood, revealing hollow eyes and a gaunt expression. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. "You don't understand," he said, his tone turning desperate. "You're putting yourself in danger by keeping her. Just give her to me, and no one has to get hurt." Sarah's pulse quickened, but she stood her ground. "Who are you? What do you want with Daisy?" The man let out a bitter laugh. "Who I am doesn't matter. What matters is that she's carrying something that doesn't belong to you, something dangerous. If you know what's good for you, you'll hand her over." Sarah's thoughts raced. Was he talking about the key? How did he know about it? Her eyes flicked to Daisy, who was now standing protectively in front of her puppies, her ears pinned back, and a low growl rumbling in her throat. "I'm calling the police," Sarah said firmly, reaching for her phone. "Don't," the man said sharply, taking another step forward. "You think the police can protect you? They don't even know what's going on. But they will, once it's too late. You're sitting on a time bomb, lady, and you don't even know it." Sarah dialed 911 anyway, her fingers trembling as she pressed the buttons. "If you don't leave, I will press charges for trespassing." The man's face darkened, and for a moment Sarah thought he might force his way inside, but then he stepped back, shaking his head. "You don't get it, do you? She's not just a dog, she's the key, and those people, those monsters, will do anything to get her back. You can't stop them." With that, he turned and disappeared into the storm, his figure swallowed by the swirling snow. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest as she slammed the window shut and locked it. The operator on the other end of the line was still speaking, but Sarah barely registered the words. She relayed what had happened as best she could, though her voice shook with adrenaline. By the time the police arrived, the man was long gone. Two officers, both skeptical but professional, took her statement and checked the perimeter of the cabin. They found nothing, no footprints, no sign of forced entry. It was as if the man had never been there at all. "You sure he wasn't just some drifter?" one of the officers asked, his tone making it clear he thought Sarah was overreacting. "I know what I saw," Sarah insisted, her hands gripping the edge of the table. "He knew Daisy's name. He knew she was here." The officers exchanged a glance but didn't press further. "We'll keep an eye out," one of them said. "But storms like this bring all kinds of people out of the woodwork. If you see anything else, call us." As they left, Sarah felt a mix of frustration and unease. She knew the man wasn't just a drifter. His words echoed in her mind. "She's the key. You're sitting on a time bomb." That night, sleep was impossible. Sarah sat by the fire, her thoughts spinning. Daisy lay nearby, her body tense, as if sensing Sarah's unease. The puppies were oblivious, their tiny snores a comforting backdrop to the storm still raging outside. Sarah picked up the key from the table, turning it over in her hands. It felt heavier now, its significance growing with each passing moment. What did it open? What could possibly be so valuable or dangerous that someone would abandon a dog and her puppies in the middle of a snowstorm to protect it? Her thoughts were interrupted by a sudden movement. Daisy had stood up, her ears perked and her eyes fixed on the door. A low growl rumbled in her throat. Sarah froze, her heart hammering. Was the man back? Grabbing the flashlight and a fire poker for protection, Sarah crept toward the door. She pressed her ear against it, straining to hear anything over the wind. There was nothing, no footsteps, no voices, but Daisy's growl didn't stop. Taking a deep breath, Sarah opened the door a crack and shone the flashlight into the darkness. The beam illuminated nothing but falling snow. She stepped outside cautiously, her breath fogging in the freezing air. Her eyes scanned the tree line, but there was no sign of anyone, and yet she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. The morning after the stranger's visit, Sarah sat at the kitchen table, the mysterious key in her hand. The events of the previous night replayed in her mind. The man's desperate words, his warning that Daisy wasn't just an ordinary dog. She looked at the key, its faint number 201, etched into the metal, and felt a shiver run down her spine. What did it unlock? And why was it worth risking Daisy's life to hide? Determined to find answers, Sarah called Tom and told him what had happened. "I think this key might be part of something much bigger," she said. "There's a number on it, 201. Could it belong to a safety deposit box?" Tom's voice was grave. "It's possible. If that's the case, the only way to know for sure is to go to a bank and ask. But Sarah, be careful. If someone is willing to track you down, this isn't just a random mystery. It's dangerous." Sarah knew he was right, but she couldn't stop now. The questions gnawed at her, and she needed answers, not just for her own safety, but for Daisy and the puppies. After feeding the dogs and ensuring they were comfortable, Sarah tucked the key into her pocket and set out for the neighboring town. The drive to the bank was tense. The storm had cleared, leaving the roads icy and treacherous. The snow-covered landscape looked serene, but Sarah felt anything but calm. Her eyes darted to the rearview mirror frequently, half expecting the stranger, or worse, someone else, might be following her. When she arrived at the small-town bank, the place was quiet, almost eerily so. Sarah hesitated at the door, her breath fogging in the cold air. Clutching the key tightly, she stepped inside. The teller at the front desk greeted her with a polite smile. "How can I help you today?" Sarah swallowed her nerves and held up the key. I found this. I think it belongs to a safety deposit box here. Can you check?" The teller took the key, examining it closely before nodding. "Yes, this is one of ours, box 201. Do you have the account holder's information?" Sarah hesitated. "No, I don't. But I think it belonged to someone who's no longer around. Is there any way I can access it?" The teller frowned. "Normally, no. But if the box has been unclaimed for a certain period, there are procedures. Let me check." She disappeared into the back room, leaving Sarah alone with her racing thoughts. When the teller returned, she looked slightly uneasy. The box was registered to a Victor Evans. It's been marked as inactive since his disappearance, but it's still here. Legally, I'm not supposed to let you open it without proof of ownership, but she hesitated, lowering her voice. "Given the circumstances, I'll make an exception. Just be careful." Sarah's heart pounded as she followed the teller into a secure room lined with safety deposit boxes. The woman unlocked box 201 and handed it to Sarah. "You can examine the contents here. Let me know if you need anything." Sarah nodded, her palms damp as she placed the box on the table. Taking a deep breath, she opened the lid. Inside was a small USB drive and a stack of documents, yellowed with age but meticulously organized. Sarah picked up the papers, her hands trembling as she scanned the first few pages. It didn't take long for the gravity of what she was holding to hit her. The documents detailed the operations of a criminal organization, names, dates, transactions. There were photographs, receipts, even handwritten notes from Victor himself. One line in particular made Sarah's blood run cold. "If something happens to me, the truth will live on. Daisy will keep it safe." She stared at the words, her mind spinning. Victor hadn't just hidden evidence, he had entrusted it to Daisy, knowing that she and her puppies might be the only ones capable of protecting it. The key in her pocket, the collar, the desperate warnings, it all made sense now. Sarah plugged the USB drive into her laptop, her pulse quickening as the screen lit up with folders labeled Evidence, Witness Statements, and Accounts. The sheer volume of information was overwhelming. Victor had compiled a damning case against the organization, enough to bring down powerful people. But it was clear why he hadn't gone directly to the authorities. The names on these documents weren't just criminals, they were influential figures, politicians, business leaders, law enforcement. Her hands shook as she clicked through the files. Victor had known the danger he was in. He had known that the people he was exposing wouldn't hesitate to kill him, and so he had turned to the one being he trusted most, Daisy. As Sarah sat in the dim room, her mind racing, the weight of the situation began to settle in. By taking Daisy in, she had unwittingly placed herself in the middle of a battle far larger than she had ever imagined. The stranger's warning echoed in her ears. "She's the key. You're sitting on a time bomb." Sarah realized he hadn't been exaggerating. The people Victor had been fighting against would stop at nothing to retrieve the evidence she now held. And if they knew Daisy was still alive, it was only a matter of time before they found her. Gathering the documents and the USB drive, Sarah carefully placed them back in the box and locked it. Her instincts screamed at her to run, to leave the box and its dangerous contents behind, but she knew she couldn't. If Victor had risked everything to gather this evidence, it was for a reason. It wasn't just his life that was at stake. It was the lives of countless others who had suffered at the hands of this organization. On the drive back to her cabin, Sarah's thoughts churned. What was she supposed to do now? She couldn't go to the police, not with the risk of corruption among their ranks, and she couldn't simply keep the evidence hidden. The longer she waited, the more danger she put herself and Daisy in. When she pulled into her driveway, Daisy was waiting by the window, her watchful eyes fixed on Sarah. The sight of the dog, so loyal and brave, despite everything she had endured, filled Sarah with a sense of resolve. She couldn't let Victor's sacrifice be in vain. She had to find a way to finish what he had started, to bring the truth to light, no matter the cost. As the snow began to fall again, Sarah stepped into the cabin and locked the door behind her. The air felt heavy with tension, but also with determination. Daisy wagged her tail slightly, her gaze never leaving Sarah's face. "We're in this together, girl," Sarah said softly, kneeling to stroke Daisy's head. "I don't know how, but we're going to make this right." The storm outside howled, but inside, Sarah's resolve burned brighter than ever. The secrets Victor had hidden in Daisy were out in the open now, and there was no turning back. The stillness of the evening felt like the calm before a storm. Sarah sat by the fire, her laptop open as she combed through the damning evidence Victor had collected. Each name, each transaction, painted a clearer picture of the sprawling criminal network he had been working to expose. It was terrifying, but Sarah couldn't look away. She had become the keeper of this truth, just as Daisy had been, and she owed it to Victor and to herself not to let it fall into the wrong hands. Daisy lay nearby, her eyes scanning the room as her puppies dozed in their box. Sarah had noticed a change in the dog since they had returned from the bank. Daisy seemed more alert, more protective, as if sensing that danger was drawing closer. Her instincts were right. The first sign came in the dead of night, the crunch of snow under heavy boots. Sarah jolted awake from the couch where she'd been dozing, her heart racing as she strained to listen. Daisy was already on her feet, her ears pinned back and a low growl rumbling in her throat. Sarah crept to the window and peered out. At first, the swirling snow made it hard to see anything. Then she spotted them, two figures moving silently through the darkness, their shadows elongated by the moonlight. Her breath caught in her throat. They had found her. She grabbed her phone and dialed 911, her fingers trembling. The operator's voice was calm, but Sarah's was shaky. "They're here," she whispered. "Two men, armed, I think. Please hurry." The next few minutes were a blur of motion. Sarah locked the doors and windows, her mind racing. She grabbed the USB drive and the documents, hiding them in a hollowed-out compartment beneath the floorboards. If they were after the evidence, they wouldn't find it easily. A loud bang shattered the tense silence. One of the men had kicked open the front door, sending splinters flying. Sarah ducked behind the kitchen counter, her heart pounding in her ears. Daisy stood between her and the intruders, her body low and tense, her teeth bared in a fierce snarl. "Where is it?" one of the men barked, his voice harsh and angry. "We know you have it!" "I don't know what you're talking about!" Sarah shouted back, trying to keep her voice steady. "Don't play dumb," the other man sneered. "The dog had it, the evidence. Where is it?" Sarah's mind raced, but before she could respond, the first man took a step closer. "We don't have time for this," he muttered, raising a crowbar. Before he could strike, Daisy launched herself at him, her growl erupting into a furious bark. The man stumbled back, caught off guard by the sudden attack. Daisy's teeth clamped down on his arm, forcing him to drop the weapon. He cursed loudly, trying to shake her off, but Daisy held firm. The second man moved toward her, pulling a knife from his belt. Sarah screamed, grabbing a cast-iron pan from the counter and hurling it at him. The pan struck his shoulder with a dull thud, and he let out a grunt of pain, dropping the knife. Chaos erupted in the small cabin. Daisy fought with the ferocity of a mother protecting her young, her movements quick and deliberate despite her size. The first man managed to shove her off, his arm bleeding, but Daisy didn't back down. She lunged again, positioning herself between the men and the puppies. Sarah seized the moment of distraction to grab a fire poker, swinging it wildly to keep the intruders at bay. "Get out!" she screamed, her voice trembling with equal parts fear and fury. The men hesitated, clearly unnerved by the relentless dog and the determined woman. But before they could make their next move, the distant wail of sirens pierced through the storm. The sound was enough to tip the scales. The men exchanged a glance, their frustration evident. "We'll be back," one of them snarled, before bolting toward the door. His companion followed, stumbling as he clutched his injured arm. Moments later, they disappeared into the snowy darkness. Sarah collapsed against the wall, her chest heaving as the adrenaline began to wear off. Daisy stood in the center of the room, her fur matted with blood, not all of it hers. She limped slightly, but her eyes remained sharp, scanning the room for any lingering threats. "You saved us," Sarah whispered, tears streaming down her face as she knelt beside the dog. "You saved us all." When the police arrived, they found the cabin in disarray, splintered wood, overturned furniture, and traces of blood on the floor. The officers took Sarah's statement, their expressions growing grimmer with every detail she provided. A search party was dispatched to track the men, but the storm had already covered their tracks. "You're lucky you're alive," one of the officers said, his tone serious. "Whoever those men are, they're dangerous. We'll do everything we can to find them." As the officers worked, Tom arrived, his face pale with worry. "Sarah, are you okay?" he asked, pulling her into a tight hug. "I'm fine," she said, though her voice wavered. "Daisy, she saved us. If it weren't for her—" Tom knelt beside the dog, his hands gentle as he examined her injuries. Daisy whimpered softly but allowed him to work. "She's got a few cuts and bruises, but nothing life-threatening," Tom said. "She's a tough one." Sarah stroked Daisy's head, her tears falling freely. "She's more than tough. She's a hero." Over the next few days, the cabin was quiet as Sarah and Daisy recovered from the ordeal. The puppies, blissfully unaware of the danger they had been in, tumbled around the room, their playful antics a stark contrast to the chaos that had unfolded. Daisy, though scarred, seemed to hold her head higher now. She limped slightly from her injuries, but her spirit remained unbroken. Sarah watched her with a mixture of awe and gratitude, knowing that without Daisy's bravery, the outcome could have been far worse. As she sat by the fire one evening, Sarah pulled the USB drive from its hiding place. She stared at it for a long moment, her resolve hardening. The evidence Victor had entrusted to Daisy was too important to keep hidden. She didn't know how she would do it, but she was determined to find a way to bring the truth to light, no matter what it took. Daisy rested her head on Sarah's lap, her eyes closing as Sarah gently stroked her fur. "We'll finish this together," Sarah murmured. "I promise." The snow had finally stopped, leaving the mountain town bathed in a soft, serene glow. The storm that had raged for weeks, both outside and in Sarah's life, was now a memory. Inside her cozy cabin, the air was warm, filled with the playful barks of Daisy's puppies and the rhythmic scratching of Sarah's pen against paper. It had been weeks since the dramatic standoff with the intruders. The police had captured the two men a few days later, tracking them to a motel in a neighboring town. The evidence Victor had collected was now in the hands of the authorities, and investigations were underway to bring the criminal network to justice. For Sarah, the relief was immense, but she knew the fight wasn't over. Justice moved slowly, but she was confident that Victor's sacrifice and Daisy's bravery would not be in vain. Daisy had recovered well from her injuries. Though her fur still bore faint scars, her spirit was as strong as ever. She moved through the cabin with a quiet dignity, her eyes always watchful, her demeanor calm but protective. The puppies, now stronger and more independent, tumbled around her feet, their playful energy a stark contrast to the danger they had survived. Sarah had made a decision. She would keep Daisy and two of her puppies, a lively pair she named Max and Ruby. Max had a mischievous streak, always finding new ways to cause harmless trouble, while Ruby was more reserved, often curling up beside Daisy as if learning from her mother's quiet strength. For the other 8 puppies, Sarah worked tirelessly to find them loving homes. With Tom's help, she connected with families in the area, ensuring each puppy went to a place where they would be cared for and loved. Saying goodbye to them was bittersweet, but Sarah knew it was the right thing to do. Each family that came to pick up their new companion left with a piece of Daisy's story, a reminder of the incredible bond between humans and animals. As life began to settle back into a peaceful rhythm, Sarah found herself reflecting on everything that had happened. The weight of Victor's legacy, the mystery of the key, the courage Daisy had shown. It was a story that deserved to be told. And so Sarah began to write. The book was more than just a retelling of the events. It was a testament to resilience, love, and the enduring spirit of those who refused to give up, even in the face of cruelty. Sarah poured her heart into every word, recounting Daisy's journey and the lessons she had learned along the way. The process was cathartic, helping Sarah to process the trauma she had endured. But it was also a mission. She wanted the world to understand the importance of compassion, not just for animals, but for all living beings. She wanted Daisy's story to inspire others to act with kindness and to see the beauty in the connections we share with the creatures around us. When the book was published, it quickly gained attention. Readers were moved by the story of a mother dog who had risked everything to protect her puppies and a woman who had stepped into danger to save them. Daisy became a symbol of hope, her story resonating with people far beyond the small mountain town. Donations poured into local animal shelters, and Sarah found herself invited to speak at events about animal welfare and the power of love. But for Sarah, the greatest reward was seeing Daisy and her puppies thrive. Her quiet cabin, once filled with solitude, was now alive with laughter and love. The bond she had formed with Daisy went beyond words. It was an unspoken understanding, a shared strength born from the trials they had faced together. One crisp spring morning, as Sarah sat on the porch with Daisy by her side and Max and Ruby chasing each other across the yard, she felt a deep sense of peace. The snow had melted, revealing the vibrant greens of the forest and the gentle trickle of a nearby stream. Life, it seemed, was beginning anew. Sarah glanced down at Daisy, who was watching the puppies with her usual calm vigilance. She smiled and scratched behind the dog's ears. "You did it, girl," she said softly. "You saved them. You saved all of us." Daisy leaned into her touch, her eyes closing briefly as if in acknowledgement. In the months that followed, Sarah continued to share Daisy's story, using the proceeds from her book to support animal rescue organizations. She volunteered at shelters, helped with adoption events, and even started a small program to educate children about the importance of treating animals with kindness. Daisy, too, played her part. At public events, she would sit patiently by Sarah's side, her calm presence a reminder of the incredible journey they had shared. People flocked to meet her, to hear her story, and to take photos with the dog who had become a symbol of courage and love. But for Sarah, Daisy was more than a symbol. She was family, and every day, as they walked together through the woods or sat by the fire, Sarah was reminded of the simple truth that had carried them through the darkest times. Love, pure, unconditional, and unwavering, had the power to heal even the deepest wounds. Through Daisy's unwavering love for her puppies, we are reminded of the true meaning of courage and sacrifice. Even when abandoned and faced with immense danger, Daisy's loyalty and resilience shine as a powerful testament to the extraordinary bond between humans and animals. Her story reminds us that, even in the darkest moments, love can triumph over fear and cruelty. Let us always care for those who cannot speak for themselves. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who believes in second chances. Together, let's spread hope and compassion, showing the world that even the smallest acts of kindness can create ripples of change. May God bless you and your loved ones, filling your days with love, courage, and faith in the beauty of life. If you have a story of love, courage, or hope, share it with us in the comments below. We'd love to hear it.